Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Rhonda Farrell bringing you Spotlight on What's Next, Week 29, from learning organizations to adaptive intelligence, building enterprises that think before they react. For decades, organizations have measured success by what they accomplished yesterday. Leaders review quarterly reports, analyze historical performance, celebrate successes, and address failures, however, after they occurred. While this approach has served organizations well in relatively stable environments, today's world demands something fundamentally different. So the future belongs to organizations that can sense change early, interpret it accurately, respond intelligently, and continuously involved. Last week, we discussed the importance of becoming a learning organization, one that captures knowledge, encourages curiosity, shares lessons learned, and embraces continuous improvement. Learning organizations create a foundation for long-term success because they understand that every project, customer interaction, innovation, and setback contains valuable insights. This week, we take that conversation one step further. The organizations that will define the next decade won't simply learn faster than their competitors. They will develop the capability to anticipate, adapt, and act before disruption forces change upon them. They will transform from learning organizations into adaptively intelligent enterprises. Why does adaptive intelligence matter so much? Because we are living in one of the fastest periods of technological, economic, and societal change in history. Artificial intelligence is reshaping entire industries. Cybersecurity threats evolve daily. Global supply chains continue to experience disruption. Workforce demographics are shifting. Customers expect increasingly personalized experience, and regulations are changing faster than organizations can traditionally respond. Political and economic uncertainty have become constants rather than exceptions. And under these conditions, reacting after the fact is can no longer afford to ask what happened. Instead, leadership must continuously ask what is changing? What are we sensing? What patterns are emerging? What should we prepare for now before it becomes tomorrow's crisis? The organizations that are asking these questions consistently will gain an enormous competitive advantage. We need to move beyond reactive leadership. Traditional organizations, well, they typically operate through a familiar cycle. Problem occurs, data is collected, analysis begins, leadership meets, recommendations are developed, resources are allocated, and solutions are implemented. Unfortunately, by the time action begins, the opportunity to create competitive advantage may already be gone. However, adaptive organizations operate very differently. Instead of waiting for problems to become obvious, they continuously monitor signals from across their enterprise and their environment. They recognize that every organization generates thousands of small indicators every day: customer complaints, employee feedback, process variation, technology trends, policy changes, economic indicators, competitive announcements, supply chain delays, market behavior, social sentiment. However, most organizations ignore these signals until they accumulate into visible problems. Adaptive organizations learn to recognize the patterns much earlier. Adaptive intelligence is more than AI. Although AI will undoubtedly become an important enabler, adaptive intelligence is not primarily about technology. It is the strategic combination of human judgment, organizational learning, quality management, systems thinking, trusted data, governance, leadership, artificial intelligence, and continuous improvement. Technology can help us detect the patterns, but people still provide the meaning. And leadership, well, they determine the action we're taking. So when all of these capabilities work together, organizations can become significantly more resilient and responsive. So the 5 main characteristics of adaptive organizations are: number 1, they sense earlier. Rather than relying solely on quarterly reports, adaptive organizations create continuous listening systems. They monitor their customers, employees, suppliers, communities, industry trends, regulatory environments, technology innovation, and competitive movements, because information should flow continuously rather than periodically to inform our leadership. Number 2, they connect disparate information. Many organizations possess enormous amounts of data. Few possess or create actual organizational intelligence. Adaptive organizations supply the connective tissue across this disparate information across their functional areas. Finance thus informs operations. Operations informs customer experience. Cybersecurity informs enterprise risk. Human resources informs strategic planning. Innovation informs investment. Rather than isolated departments, the enterprise becomes a well-oiled, interconnected system. Number 3, they decide faster. Adaptive organizations reduce unnecessary bureaucracy while strengthening governance. Decision-making moves closer to the people with the best information. Executives focus less on approving every decision and more on enabling better decisions throughout the organization. Speed increases, quality improves, and accountability remains. Number 4, they learn continuously. Every initiative becomes a learning opportunity. Projects include structured retrospectives. Knowledge is documented. Lessons are shared across business units. Best practices become repeatable. Institutional knowledge grows rather than disappearing when employees leave, and learning becomes operationalized. 5, they adapt constantly. Rather than launching large transformation programs every few years, adaptive organizations make hundreds of small adjustments continuously. Continuous improvement thus becomes continuous evolution. Small improvements compound into extraordinary organizational capability. So leadership in the age of adaptive intelligence is changing the role of leaders dramatically. Yesterday's leaders managed to stability. Tomorrow's leaders will manage to continuous adaptation. This requires new questions. What assumptions are we making? What signals are we overlooking? What trends should concern us? What opportunities are emerging? What capabilities will we need 3 years from now? And what should we stop doing? So how can AI strengthen and not replace human judgment? These questions shift leadership from operational oversight towards strategic foresight. So what are the practical actions you can take this next week? Well, you don't need, number 1, a multi-million-dollar transformation program to begin building adaptive intelligence. We can start with these 5 actions. 1, listen more broadly. Expand the voices that you hear: customers, employees, partners, community organizations, young professionals, industry experts, because innovation frequently begins with better listening. Number 2, create a weekly signal review. Rather than reviewing only metrics, ask your leadership team, what changed this week? What surprised us? What patterns are emerging and what deserves closer attention? Small conversations today prevent large problems tomorrow. Connect your teams. Invite departments that rarely interact to solve problems together, because innovation often occurs at the intersection of different perspectives. Capture lessons learned. After every project, ask what worked, what didn't, what surprised us, what should become standard practice, because knowledge compounds when it is shared. And then lastly, build curiosity into your culture, reward thoughtful questions, celebrate experimentation, encourage respectful debate, and organizations that remain curious remain competitive. So our reflective questions for this week are, as you finish reading this session, spend a few minutes reflecting. Where might our organization still be reactive instead of anticipating? Which signals might we be currently overlooking? How effectively are we connecting information across teams? Where might bureaucracy slow intelligent action? What capabilities should we begin building today that our organization will depend upon tomorrow? The answers to these questions often reveal your greatest opportunities for strategic improvement. So our challenge for this next week is to identify one reoccurring challenge your team experiences. Instead of solving the same problem again and again and again, investigate what happened before the issue emerged. What signals were present? What conversations were occurring? What data was available? What assumptions went unchallenged? And let's design one simple way to recognize those indicators earlier next time. Over time, these small tweaks will create an organization that anticipates instead of reacts. So our closing thought for today is learning organizations improve because they reflect on yesterday. Adaptive organizations improve because they prepare for tomorrow. The organizations that thrive in the coming decade will not necessarily be the largest, the oldest, or even the most technologically advanced. They will be the ones that learn continuously, connect knowledge intelligently, and empower people thoughtfully and adapt deliberately. The future will not belong to those who simply respond to change. It will belong to those who recognize change early enough to reshape it. Again, this is Dr. Rhonda Farrell, the CEO of Global Innovation Strategies, bringing you week 29 of Spotlight on What's Next. Turning organizations to adaptive intelligence, building enterprises that think before they react.